Good afternoon. On January the 13th at 10 o'clock in the evening, it was a Sunday, we uploaded that film onto YouTube and set out to change our famous tagline to the best a man can get, to a best a man can be, and start a conversation about the role of men in today's society. It was quite a week for me. We didn't put it on TV, and we didn't spend $1 on media or paid support for the film, and it exploded. It went viral very quickly over the first couple of days. Within a week, it had 110 million views, 15 billion media impressions, and it exploded the Twitter sphere. Hashtag Gillette was trending ahead of hashtag Brexit. I think everybody had enough of Brexit, even at that point, and many other themes as well. Also within a week, it became the most liked ad on YouTube ever, but also the most disliked ad on YouTube ever. And it was an interesting week to work through the journey that involved. And it begged, I'll talk about that journey in a minute, but it begged a few questions that are important for brands and important for business. And one is, what does it feel like to step into the fray, to step into a discussion like this when you're a brand? And I had told my teams for many years that it's important for brands to talk about more than the delivery of their functional benefit, that it's important for brands today to talk about social causes or environmental causes that are authentic and close to the brand's purpose. And brands need to do that today, and in doing so, a greater proportion of consumers will feel more connected to the brand and fall in love with the brand. But it's probably right to say that a few consumers won't like what you say. And I knew this to be true theoretically. I'd never experienced it in reality. And to experience it was quite something. The initial reaction on social media, I have to say, from a minority, but we didn't know it at that point, in the overblown world of social media where people can act anonymously, of course, was somewhat overwhelming. And the news story in the first few days was about the reaction to that ad. But I will say, and incidentally, the reaction to that ad, I had the headlines on the last screen. It included, I loaded it on my LinkedIn account. Now LinkedIn, you're all on LinkedIn, right? That's a fairly professional, well-balanced platform, I thought. I loaded the ad on the Sunday night. On the Wednesday, by the Wednesday, I'd had many, many, many comments that ranged, and I'm not exaggerating, from a death threat to an invitation to speak at the United Nations and everything in between. As I say, it was a remarkable week. But after 2 or 3 days, the silent majority stepped up and started to engage in the debate. And the backlash against the backlash, if you will, began. And it gave us confidence to keep going. And we did keep going. Perhaps another question that an experience like this prompts is, why should brands involve themselves in social issues? And the reality is that consumers expect it now. Consumers want brands to have a point of view about what's important in today's society, particularly the younger generation. And indeed, if brands don't have the courage to have a point of view, that can be a real problem for today's consumers. And of course, in reality, brands have always influenced social norms. The reality is that advertised brands do characterize people and can either reinforce negative stereotypes or bring to life, new stereotypes. So, brands have incredible power in that environment. And there's an obligation that comes with that power to handle it with responsibility. So why did Gillette choose to take a stand? Why did we choose to launch ourselves into this? Well, the reason we did it is because men matter in the discussion of gender equality. It's no longer true that men simply not engaging in negative behavior is enough. Not being a bully, not sexually harassing people, that's not enough. Being passive supporters of the movement to get to a more gender equal world is not enough. Men have to step up. Men have to proactively step in and help move the conversation forward and move behavior forward. And we felt Gillette had a role to play in that discussion. Not least because for many years Gillette has been portraying a version of men. And if you look at Gillette's advertising over the last 20 years, the version of man that we have portrayed, characterized, celebrated, has been the typical alpha male. A winner, a leader, irresistible to women. Those are not necessarily bad traits, but perhaps it was time for a more progressive portrayal of men in today's society, and we felt Gillette should take on that charge. Now, as you can tell from the reaction in social media at the start, we have our detractors, and some of them are very vocal. And they expressed their views very vocally in those first few days. But the reality is, the vast majority of people who saw that film, and many, many people have seen it now, the vast majority enjoyed it. They have more affinity for the brand, having seen it. They believe the brand shares their own values, and their propensity to purchase Gillette as a consequence has been strengthened. And that gave us great reassurance. This is large-based consumer research. That gave us great reassurance that we should continue on this journey. And I guess the last question I should raise is it worth it? And there were moments where we had the opportunity to back away, particularly in those first few days. We could have taken the film off YouTube. We could have suppressed comments. We chose not to do that. We didn't suppress the comments. We let the conversation unfold. And I'm glad we did. Yeah, I've got many pictures like this. I wish he did shave with Gillette. You know, there was a moment during those first few days, and we had a bunch of crisis meetings, as you might imagine, where I emptied my office and I sat down and I looked at that film one more time and watched it on my own. And the film basically says, if you see bullying, it's no longer good enough just to say, well, I'm not a bully, it's fine. You've got to step up and do something about it. If you see sexual harassment, it's no longer good enough to simply say, well, I don't sexually harass people, so I'm fine, I'm playing my part. No, that's no longer good enough. That's all that film says. So as a consequence, we did double down and we stayed with it, and I'm glad we did. You know, for many years, brands have been drivers of economic growth. Brands have been a force for growth. But in today's world, they can also be a force for good. And that's what Gillette wants to be. So, as the days and weeks rolled on, the backlash to the backlash became clearer, and the silent majority stepped up and started involving themselves in the debate. And we got lots and lots of positive comments back. The brand equity strengthened, our trust scores strengthened, our business strengthened. We have a direct-to-consumer business which accelerated. And we put our money where our mouth is. We didn't just air the piece of film, but we've also committed $3 million to charities and non-profit organizations whose mission is to support the development of young people and young men in society. And perhaps most pleasingly for me was the number of institutions who took the film and used it as a vehicle to spark a conversation. Many high schools around the world, universities around the world, churches, youth clubs, all used that film to spark a conversation about modern masculinity and what it means to be a man in today's society. And that was very heartwarming, because that conversation is really important. That conversation is really important. Conversation leads to understanding. Understanding can lead to attitude change, and attitude change can lead to behavior change. I don't agree with those people who say that the ad was having a go at the masculinity of all men. It was not. It did highlight the poor behavior of the few, but it also celebrated the great behavior of the many. And there are many, many men in the world who are doing great things, who are setting the standard for boys to aspire to and for men to achieve. And that's really, really important, because the next generation of men and women are watching. Thank you. The work I've discussed with you is just one part of P&G's commitment to creating a more equal world. And during my time in Europe, I was president of our European business some time ago. I was proud to lead the affinity group in P&G for LGBTQ employees. And it was through this role that I became aware of our next speakers. Hannah and Jake are an inspiration for all businesses who are seeking to improve representation and equality. I'm delighted to introduce Britain's most influential transgender couple, Hannah and Jake Graff. Thank you.